I'm Jim Shaw from the Colonial Times Magazine. I'm joined here by Caitlin Kelleher, the editor of the Lexington Minuteman, and we're now here with Coffee with the Candidates with candidate Bill Hurley, who's actually running this time as a candidate for re-election. As you may know, in the special election this past November, Bill was elected to his first term on the Lexington School Committee, which was I believe, an interim term, and now
Correct.
You're standing for election to a full term.
Correct.
So let me just lead with that. You know, last time we were talking, we were looking for a new superintendent. You were running as a challenger and not necessarily an incumbent. So some things have changed. So now, from the perspective as an incumbent, you've been busy over the last couple of months getting ready, welcoming a new superintendent. What are some of your thoughts on that with a new superintendent here? And as an incumbent, does the perspective look any different?
To this degree, I'm much busier than I anticipated being. And I think it's because it's an extraordinary time. That between the search for the superintendent and our work with the ad hoc space committee in terms of what are we going to do with it to accommodate the anticipated increase in enrollment, I've attended at least 22 school committee meetings or subcommittees of the school committee in less than just about a 2-month period. So the perspective from my perspective is, having been in education and as a superintendent for many, many years, where the school committee generally meets twice a month, the pace of this has far exceeded what I had even imagined. But it's because we're dealing with very, very important topics and issues right now. So I dove right into it. The day after I was elected, I was at the joint conference of superintendents and statewide superintendents and school committee members on Cape Cod. That was the day after the election. And since then, it's been nonstop.
What stood out to you as kind of some of the biggest things you've done in the last 2 months? That's all it's really been. Yeah,
well, interestingly, the election of the election actually of the superintendent led the committee to ask me if I would be the intermediary, if you will, during that process of negotiating with the candidate. Now, I wasn't negotiating what the salary was going to be or what the benefits were going to be, but I was the point person for the candidate, for her attorney, for our attorney, and the chair of our committee. And the reason that the chair asked me to do that was so that communications would not get confused, and it would flow through one person. And having been a superintendent, I was able to speak contract language for superintendents with the candidate, with the attorney for the school committee, and with the attorney for the superintendent who had been elected. So that was a really, really busy time. I was on the telephone quite a bit with all of the people, explaining what the expectations were, what some concerns were. But I enjoyed that. It was because I had a perspective of having been there, knowing what that process was really about. So I think it turned out that I think it was beneficial to be on the committee at that point in time, and it really was one of the reasons that I decided to run.
Right.
So,
well, let me just pick up there for a second. I mean, so because we want to remind folks that it's only been a couple of months, but we did talk a little bit about it before. Your experience in the past, you have been a principal, you've been a superintendent, you've been an interim superintendent here in Lexington.
Correct.
And so this is sort of one more place that you're able to work and develop education policy. So maybe you talk just a little bit more and remind people a little bit about your background as you sort of come back and seek to continue that work.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I've been in this business since 1970. As a teacher, a psychologist, sped director, principal, assistant superintendent for just about everything, personnel, contract negotiations. And 19 years 5 years as an assistant superintendent, 14 years as a superintendent. So I bring that whole perspective, and I bring it not only for the election of a new superintendent beginning in July, but to be able to help in that transition of leadership from Dr. Ash, who I've known personally and professionally for a long time, to the new person who is going to be coming in. And having had contact with her during this whole negotiation process, I anticipate and hope to be very, very helpful in that transition of leadership as Dr. Ash leaves and as a new person comes in. It's a critically important time for the district. when you make that kind of change. And I've experienced it myself. When I retired and somebody replaced me, I know what it feels like to have to let go of something that's you've been involved with for a very long time. So I'm very, very sensitive to the current superintendent and all that he has done. But as he leaves to help with this new person, because I've been newly elected in three different towns as the incoming person, so I bring that perspective as well.
What makes for a smooth transition, and how does the school committee help make it a smooth transition?
It's a joint effort between the superintendent, the school committee, and really all the personnel and the community at large. It's a team effort, and I'm very much a team player. It's somebody I do professional development and team building and how to build teams. So it's not any one person's responsibility or one segment of the population. It's the responsibility of all of us to make this go as well as possible, because we have 6,700 students, 1,000 employees, and it's normal for this to be a time between now and the end of the year of a certain degree of anxiety for people. Anytime there's a change, particularly at the top, people wonder, we're comfortable in what we know, and as we make a transition, there's this wonder of what's this new person going to be like, what she, in this particular case, what are her expectations are going to be. So and I fully expect, and I know that Dr. Ash and Dr. Jakowski, the incoming superintendent, do plan to meet and have conversations so that she's up to speed when she gets here. She's also planning to come to participate in some town events. I think she intends to be here on for the April 19th celebrations. So, and it's also that the school committee has that same interest in the superintendent and the new superintendent, spending time together, understanding the culture here, understanding what the topics are going to be and the challenges as he leaves the office and she steps into it. So it's not like party politics,
Right.
Because they're people, they know each other. He's the incoming and the outgoing superintendent. Professionally and personally, they know each other. So that helps, I think, very much in that transition.
Right. Well, when you were talking about some of those challenges, one of those challenges, obviously, and you alluded to it a little earlier, which is the school building and the capital improvement and program. The consultants have said that we need to start making provisions for down the road. Like we thought the numbers would be going down, but apparently they're going up, and we have to make provisions for that. So is that something that's on the forefront of your agenda? And maybe you could share some of your thoughts on how we do that, the cost factor, how we deal with that.
It's very much not only in my agenda, but in my time slotting right now, because along with Judy Crocker, another member of the school committee, she and I have been the school committee's representatives to the ad hoc space planning committee. So we've had numerous meetings. Judy many more than I, because she's been involved with this going back to beginning of the summer or late spring. And since I've been elected, I've been asked to be the co-chair with her. So I haven't been on this as long as she has, but we've been very, very busy meeting with the other members of the ad hoc committee. There are a couple of things that we know. We know the enrollment's increasing, and from the study that's been done by some of the citizens here in town, it's going to continue to grow for at least the next 5 years. No one wants to predict beyond 5 years because there isn't a level of reliability confidence in doing that. But in the next 5 years, we may have as many as another 500 to 600 students. And they'll be spread out over the elementary schools, and then they move on to the middle school, and they go on to the high school. So it impacts our system pre-K to 12, all of that. There are many, many challenges in trying to address this, because if we tried to do it all overnight, it would be an impossible task, because we're talking about multiple building projects. We don't even know yet, are we going to be touching every single one of them? Are we going to be touching most of them, and to what degree? Will we be providing temporary space in some locations, permanent space in other locations? What do we do with the increasing pre-K population? I'm thinking more and more, maybe it might be wise to have a freestanding building so that as it needs to grow, if we had them in modulars, we could add modulars and not be impacting the core spaces in brick and mortar schools, our existing structures. So these are just a sampling of the challenges that we face, all of us, in looking at this, just physically in terms of the physical plants. Then the other big piece is that we're just beginning to get a handle on is what is the cost going to be to be able to accommodate this, and how do we do it? Do we do it all at once, or do we try to phase it in? And if we phase it in, does that leave some places crowded for a couple of more years? And the thought of that upsets a lot of, particularly parents who have children in schools, that might happen. But we do need to be very, very thoughtful in our planning of this, because we don't want 8 or 9 or 10 years down the road saying, you know what, we should have done more, or we should have done less, or we should have done it differently.
Right.
And then to determine what is the best way to finance all of this, given that there are other needs in town as well. We're looking at police, new police station, new fire station, Centerscape, and a number of other facilities that need to be addressed. So we'll go about this carefully, thoughtfully, do the right thing, and do it in a way that the people in the town, living in the town, can afford to do it.
How do you start to sell these projects? I mean, the tax rate didn't go up, but the bills have. A lot of people are feeling that, and if you keep asking for capital exclusions or debt exclusions, voters may not say yes.
And that's true, and it's a concern that I have, and one when I express to people, you know, as we make these requests, we have to keep that in mind. And some people look at it and say, well, gee, is he not advocating for children? There's never been a time in my life where I don't advocate for children.
Right.
But on the other hand, we don't want it to fail. I mean, if we fail if it fails. So that's why it is so incumbent upon us to be very, very thoughtful about this, both in what we do and what is the likelihood that we get broad-based support.
Right.
We know we have supportive parents, but there are a lot of people who don't have children in schools anymore, many of whom are getting older, don't have the income growth that they had when they were working, if they're retired now. And we need to understand what that means to them as well. But it's a community that's always provided for the care and nurturing of our students, of our young people.
Yeah.
And it will continue to do it. We just need to do it and do it in the right way, and to do it in such a way that there'll be some financial impact. The good thing about debt exemptions and debt exclusion is they're for a period of time.
Right.
You know, they start slowly, they peak, and then after 20 years, that debt is gone.
Right.
So it doesn't have the impact that an operating override does, where it increases that tax base and it stays increased.
Right. And I think it's important to point out too, for some folks who may not understand, that a certain number of projects like the refurbishing of Cary Hall,
Right.
some of the new the community center, a lot of that's done with what they call CPC money, community preservation funds, that don't necessarily come from the tax revenues directly. I mean, it's not to say that tax revenues aren't impacted, but you know, it's important to say. I don't want folks at home saying, "Well, we shouldn't pay for this for the schools because, you know, we've just spent a fortune on this, that, and the other thing." I think it's important to understand that there are different sources of revenue.
Correct.
And so, you know, it's not like we're, you know, sort of robbing the schools because we've paid too much over here. So, you know, and that may be a discussion for another time. But I just thought it was important to point that out.
Excuse me for
Yeah.
interrupting you, but for clarification, the rate of increase that we see right now is not related to the schools.
No, not at all.
No.
It's
Right.
value. It's values.
It's the
in
value of
town.
the property, and
Yeah,
every couple of
valuations,
years,
yep.
as we reevaluate our property, people are seeing their neighbors' homes going for far more than they anticipated.
Right.
And people are outbidding each other to get
Right.
into Lexington, and that's what's driving.
And it's not
Right.
the schools and all of that.
Right.
And I think it's an important clarification to
Yeah.
make. We've got just a few more minutes here. Priorities. I know leadership. We've got new leadership coming in. I know you touched upon it before. I don't know if you want to expound on that at all. You've got a great deal of experience, you know, serving, you know, and I obviously, you know, there was, I think I heard somebody say before, you know, we don't need 2 superintendents, you know. So as a member of the school committee,
Right.
you're really functioning as a member of the school committee. You're not trying to second guess what's going on in the school department or sort of challenge the agenda at all?
No, and I don't. When I see Dr. Ash, it's at a school committee meeting. I have not given him one piece of advice yet in terms of like, I think you should do this or you should
Right.
do that. When there was a conversation, it's with my colleagues at the table. I've not gone knocking at his door and said, you know, let me sit down with you and tell you what I think you should be doing here.
Is it easy to draw that line between having been a superintendent and now being on the school committee?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's even more helpful because I understand the complexity of that job. One of our other town administrators, when interviewing the new candidate who came in, mentioned to the other town administrators, these are not school personnel, but town personnel, he said, you know, I've been doing this business for over 20 years, and I have to tell you, watching superintendents, I can tell you what their life is like. It's like when you wake up every morning, like they're being shot out of a cannon, because you don't know what to expect.
Right.
And I appreciate that, and I respect that, and so I mean, I'm really hands off on that. Where I do get involved as a school committee member is in the policy pieces. If we're going to have a discussion on should we add foreign language, for instance,
Right.
That really is the domain of the school committee to have that conversation, and we have that conversation at the table. We might ask the advice of the superintendent, but we discuss that as policy people. I don't. The day-to-day operations, we hire people to do those things.
Right.
I know I've done them before, and respect that. So that's not been difficult for me at all. This transition to this position is exactly what I thought it was, and
Right.
all the time that I'm spending is on policy issues and not operational.
We got about a minute left, and I just thought what we do is maybe give you a chance to. Well, you touched on curriculum. I know that's like say, can you give us a minute on curriculum?
Sure.
But just because you mentioned it, I thought it might be nice for you, to mention, where you stand on things like music curriculum and the various curriculums that have been sort of in jeopardy in the past.
Yeah.
How important are they? And then just take a second to sort of wind up and let people know why it is that you feel so strongly about coming back and serving again and continuing that work on the board.
As it comes to curriculum, the broader the curriculum that we can provide for youngsters, the more likely we are to tap each one of their talents. And really that's what we want to do. We talk about we want our children to be successful, our students to be successful, and they are when we learn what their interests are and we can tap into it. So the more that we can provide, whether it's foreign languages, our music program. I went to the Cal Chinese celebration this weekend, and to see 100 of our high school chorus people, young men and women up there on that stage, that's phenomenal that we can provide those kinds of programs for youngsters. And then the middle schools meeting up and singing Chinese songs in Mandarin. I mean, to watch 12 and 13-year-olds, I mean, it's wonderful to live in a town that is able to provide that. So I'm running for re-election because I think I bring all these life experiences, and I have the understanding of the schools and the operations, but I understand policy too, and the tough decisions that we have in balancing doing all that we want to do with realizing we can't do everything, and setting the priorities, and particularly when it comes to building structures, to be able to do it in such a way that the town feels as though it can afford to do it.
Excellent. Well, Bill Hurley, thank you for joining us here at Hastings Park. We're here in their lovely living room, so it's comfortable. I want to move right in.
Terrific setting, isn't it?
It really is wonderful.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
So we wish you well. Again, I want to remind folks the election is March 2nd, Monday, March 2nd. And Bill Hurley, again, is seeking re-election to the Lexington School Committee. So, Bill, thank you for joining with us today.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.